The Sword of Etheria is best described as being a mix of both Chaos Legion and Star Ocean Until the End of Time, though instead of legions, you have other characters that assist you in battle, much like Star Ocean Until the End of Time. Though the game involves moving from one arena to the next, and requires you to kill everything in the area or complete the objective to continue to the next area, just like in Chaos Legion. There's also an intermission screen after each stage, where you can upgrade your characters. The combat is built around the idea of juggling enemies in real time by timing your attacks, similar to that of Star Ocean Until the End of Time's metagame, but unlike Star Ocean Until the End of Time where you had to swap between characters and control them manually, the Sword of Etheria has AI-controlled partners that operate with the juggling system in mind. The problem with this is that the AI have the tendency to do their own thing rather than waiting for you to give them orders. This can lead to situations where you launch a locked-on enemy only for them to send a different enemy towards you that you aren't locked onto because they were too busy fighting something else. You can tell them to target specific enemies, but this also causes problems, as they will start attacking it normally, which can be problematic if you launch the enemy, because the recovery time for their attacks will prevent them from juggling that enemy. Speaking of recovery time, the combat in the Sword of Etheria is tremendously sluggish to the point that it feels agonizing whenever you miss an attack, since the recovery time for each attack is ridiculously long, leaving you open to being attacked. On top of all this, much like Chaos Legion, there are numerous enemies on screen in later stages, making it difficult to avoid getting hit by enemy attacks, particularly later on in the game. Initially there's no crowd control available to you, but there is an ability called the Death Blow, which can be used to clear out groups of enemies quickly. The problem is that to do this, you need to increase your tension gauge to a certain amount. In order to do so, you have to keep juggling enemies by sending them back and forth between all three characters until it builds up. There are two types of Death Blow initially, those being a solo Death Blow and a cooperative Death Blow. There is a third one, but it can only be used later on in the game and involves using all three of your characters at once. The problem with Death Blows is that you are unable to conserve them due to the fact that your tension meter decreases over time, so you either use it or lose it. If the combat itself wasn't problematic enough, the levels themselves tend to be annoying as well. Some levels have orbs which you have to destroy using Death Blows to progress, one of which is accompanied with exploding enemies. Another level has walls that eat you, enemies you have to launch into those man-eating walls to kill, and acid that drops in certain areas. One level has ghosts that damage you if you hit them, and the level after that has enemies without shadows that you can't hit, and if you try to, the long recovery time will leave you open to be attacked. There is also a level where you are chased by a black void that damages you if you get too close. It's as if the developers had so little confidence in their combat system that they had to design the levels in a way that would make the player have a harder time juggling enemies. So they threw in all of this extra bullshit in an attempt to make the game more challenging. But all it managed to do was turn what would have been a flawed, yet tolerable game into an infuriating ordeal. It's a shame that the combat has so many issues, as the idea behind the combat system is really cool, and even though it's not all that fun to play, it can still be fun to watch. It's one of those combat systems that would look really good in the trailer, but when you actually play it yourself, you start to realise just how bland the combat really is. All you are doing is juggling and performing death blows, rinse and repeat. This may be fun for the first few minutes of gameplay, but it becomes quite boring after a while. Of course, that's assuming that the AI are doing what you want them to do, and that you're not being attacked by enemies in the middle of juggling an enemy. I think the game needs a bit more variation to the combat. Heck, your AI companions appear to have unique moves of their own that you, the player, cannot use yourself, which is a shame since it would have made the combat a lot more interesting. I'd say that the Sword of Etheria's combat needs the Odin Sphere Lathosier treatment in the sense that they redo the entire combat system from scratch, because in its current state, it cannot be saved. The Sword of Etheria has quite a lot of dialogue for a 3D beat-em-up, and even requires players to make dialogue choices, which impact a few things later on in the game. The story is supposed to be a retelling of The Wizard of Oz, in the most anime way possible. The end result of this is a nonsensical story with a basic plot throughout. The characters themselves are mostly cardboard cutouts, though this is to be expected from a 3D beat-em-up. Now I do want to point out that there is a character in the game named Leon. Now Leon is voiced by Dave Wittenberg, and the reason for this is likely due to the fact that Dave Wittenberg also voiced Leon Belmont in Castlevania Lament of Innocence. There is even an unlockable costume for Leon that resembles Leon Belmont's attire that can be acquired in-game. What's funny about this is that even though Leon doesn't even remotely resemble Leon from Castlevania, he does however bear a striking resemblance to another one of Dave Wittenberg's roles.
You're wasting your breath, kid. The way he is now, he's not gonna listen to anything we have to say. I know, because I used to be the exact same way. He's not gonna listen to sense until we beat it into him! Alright, I'm done lecturing. Time to teach you a lesson. Hey, that Cliff sure is something. Or, you're a genius, Cliff. Don't worry. I've got a hunch they won't kill us right away. Don't bother me with semantics, kid. How are we gonna get out of these? Shut your trap, kid. Come on, you saw this civilization's level of technology. Look, all they need is a little college physics. And I don't know about you, kid, but I was paying attention in class. So what I'm saying is, if we're gonna cooperate with someone, it might as well be that hot chick over there. Know what I mean?
Everything from his appearance, his personality, his fighting style, and of course his voice, resembles that of Cliff Bitter from Star Ocean Till the End of Time, to the point that they're basically the exact same character. And because of this, I can't help but feel distracted whenever I hear his voice in game. Funnily enough, Leon's level 1 death blow is similar to that of Cliff's fiery tackle move in Star Ocean Till the End of Time, and is arguably one of the most effective death blows in the game if you ask me. With all that aside, there's not much else to say about the story of the Sword of Etheria, which brings us to the visuals. While I can't say that the game's visuals are bad, as I do like the art style for the characters, the game suffers from the same problem Chaos Legion has in the sense that it is littered with barren and empty arenas. While this could pass for a 2003 game, I expect better from a 2005 game. I suppose there is at the very least a more vibrant use of colour in this game compared to that of Chaos Legion, though that's probably because the game isn't going for the same grimdark tone Chaos Legion has. As much as it pains me to say it, the soundtrack is pretty much the game's only saving grace, and while I'd love to recommend this game on the music alone, I would be doing you all a disservice by doing so, since it would mean playing the actual game. However, I highly recommend you all listen to the Sword of Eteria's wonderful soundtrack. Those who enjoy the Castlevania game soundtracks will feel right at home with the Sword of Eteria's soundtrack, as it is composed by Michiru Yamane, and I personally consider the Sword of Eteria to be her best work. Put simply, if you enjoy heavy metal, you won't be disappointed, as the metal tracks in this game really get you pumped up for some action. The music in general is really catchy and energetic. It's very similar to Castlevania Curse of Darkness overall, so if you like that game's soundtrack, you'll really love this one. It's just a shame that the rest of the game lets the soundtrack down. I swear this soundtrack would be amazing if it was in something like Dynasty Warriors, as it would fit the fast-paced combat of those games perfectly. Sadly, this game's sluggish combat doesn't quite fit the tempo of the music, which really sucks. By now, I think you all know what my stance on this game is. Now, I'm sure that there will be people out there who like this game based on the concept alone. If there's one thing for sure, there's a lot of work put into this game, and there's quite a bit of extra content thrown in there too. The Sword of Eteria is definitely a project that has a lot of passion and thought put into it. It's just a shame that the end result turned out so poorly. If they were to remake this game and rebuild the combat system from scratch like they did with Odin Sphere, then I'd play it in a heartbeat. That's how much I really want to love this game. Sadly though, I cannot recommend the Sword of Eteria in its current state. If you want to see my written review, the link is in the description. I'll see you guys later.